pass us by at the press site across the way from the center part of the
Now T minus 3 hours, 18 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. We are watching as the astronaut cosmonaut of Crew 9 are passing the vehicle assembly building now. See from the helicopter wide shot, just making their turn here. Seeing a nice aerial shot of the VAB. You can see on the far left-hand side of your screen the C3PF, where you see a little Starliner icon. That's where the Starliner vehicle from the crew flight test is currently being worked on. The Mobile Launcher 2 is currently being constructed. That's where those red and yellow cranes are located at the top of your screen, just coming out of frame. Currently inside the vehicle assembly building is the core stage for the Artemis 2 mission. Out at Launch Complex 39B is the Mobile Launcher 1, which is set to roll back to the vehicle assembly building sometime early next month. As we continue with our live coverage, if you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us to allow some more folks to find their way into this live coverage. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank Damien Williams for a $5 super chat, saying awesome coverage. How about more archive video collection of historically significant launches, include older international launches as well? That's something that we can look into. We'll certainly talk about it behind the scenes and look at some possibilities there as we continue to build out our YouTube channel and look for other ways to bring everyone some interesting content here. Certainly appreciate the suggestion and look for any and all input from you all, especially from our channel member community. You can also use the Discord to send us some feedback as well. Taking a live look now at Launch Complex 39B. You see the
This is Core on countdown. T-minus 3 hours, 15 minutes. Advanced team is complete with their actions and ready for crew arrival.
good call from Mission Control. Crew still on the move, following along a good pathway here to Space Launch Complex 40. If you haven't already seen it, we do have a video update on the mobile launcher. Had the opportunity to go out there and talk with Jesse Burtis, who is the deputy project manager for the mobile launcher one. If you'd like to learn more about the testing and checkouts that have been happening over the past year and some change with the Artemis program ahead of that mobile launcher rolling back to the vehicle assembly building. And that's up on the YouTube channel right now, so you can be sure to check that out at your convenience. Now T-minus 3 hours, 14 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. Taking a look now, pad 39A. Up till now, all of the Crew Dragon launches have lifted off from this pad. Nice aerial view of that pad. You should see the Starship Tower coming into view on the right-hand side of your screen. Coming in there, yep, there it is. The Starship Tower, of course, an important component for the Artemis missions, as Starship will be the lander used to bring the astronauts on the Artemis 3 and 4 missions down to the lunar surface. Seeing the crew pass by the shoreline here Ocean represented in the Crew 9 emission patch as well. Want to thank Ian James for a $5 super chat, saying thank you, Will, all of Spaceflight Now crew for the coverage. Shout out also to the best mod ever, even the 3 who were MIA, which Aussie Space Girl, in her defense, is joining us from Australia, and it is about 10 p.m. there, so a bit on the late side, so don't blame her for not being with us, but of course we'll keep an eye out for our other minutes, sure to give them good Spaceflight Now below. T-minus 3 hours, 9 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Seeing the crew continue on down the access road here adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean. See the chopper up in the air in this dash cam shot. The structure just on the horizon there is the vertical integration facility for Space Launch Complex 41, and there is their final destination, Space Launch Complex 40. First my mistake, that was the former Delta IV Heavy pad that was on the horizon. It's obviously a very different vantage point from what we're used to seeing for a crew arrival heading up to the pad. So SpaceX and NASA, of course, taking advantage of giving us full dash cam views of a street level vantage point coming up to Slip 40. Those, of course, are the emergency vehicles standing by the end of the emergency egress system should something happen where they need to make a quick escape. They have a chute system, which we'll show you in just a little bit, part of our conversation with the safety officer. That was one of the last components added to this pad to certify it for crewed launches. Of course, we have a package on that also on our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen the history and the lineage of testing this pad and certifying it for crewed launches, you can check that out at your leisure as well. If you're just joining us for the first time with this live coverage today, this is Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're taking a live aerial look at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. At the top of the Falcon 9 rocket is a Crew Dragon spacecraft. The first time a crewed mission is set to depart from Pad 40 here at the Cape. That particular Crew Dragon, named Freedom, ready to launch for its 4th time, having previously supported the Crew 4 mission, as well as 2 missions for Axiom Space, AX-2 and AX-3. This is the level of the tower that is just beneath the crew access arm, which you can see here. These are two members of SpaceX's advanced team. This is the white room, and you can see there a pristine white square surrounding the black SpaceX logo. Don't see a NASA meatball in here, so presumably Nick and Alex, Nick Hague, the NASA astronaut commander of this mission, and Alexander Gorbanov, the Roscosmos cosmonaut mission specialist, may leave their signatures around the SpaceX X. Typically at Pad 39A, they would sign around the NASA meatball, signifying that this is a crew mission for NASA. Being that this is all brand new, we'll see what new traditions bear out this time around. This is a satellite view overlooking Florida from one of the GO satellites goes east. And we'll be talking with the launch weather officer a little bit closer to liftoff to get as relevant a picture of the weather outlook as possible as they prepare to fuel the Falcon 9 rocket in the final hour before the planned liftoff at 1:17 p.m. Eastern, 17:17 UTC. Now T-minus 3 hours, 2 minutes, 2 seconds and counting, taking a live look at Dragon Freedom. As we're awaiting the crew to step out of their Teslas and begin to ascend the crew access tower, we're actually getting ready to bring you our first live interview of the day. So stand by as we get that set up, and we'll be right back with our first special guest. You're watching live coverage of the Crew 9 mission to the International Space Station with Spaceflight Now.
This is Core on countdown. T-minus 3 hours. Crew have arrived at the pad on time.
Now T-minus 2 hours, 59 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. NASA astronaut Nick Hague, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov heading up to the space level. One of the buttons that is specially labeled here within the elevator. Those arrows are guiding them, if needed, to the emergency egress system. Those big white arrows are for. You can see Nick and Alex just emerged from the elevator, saying hello to the advanced team. Crew's running a little bit ahead of schedule. Currently T-minus 2 hours, 57 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. Their arrival time was actually listed as T-minus 2 hours and 55 minutes, so a couple minutes ahead of time. Walking down the crew access arm here. You can see Nick Hague on the left from this vantage point, Alexander Gorbanov on the right. The first duo to walk down the crew access arm in preparation for a launch from Space Launch Complex 40. You can see Cape Canaveral Space Force Station all around them in those rectangular windows to their right and left. See, they're about to leave their signatures.
This is Core on countdown. T-minus 2 hours, 56 minutes. Crew have arrived at the White Room.
You can see there is no NASA meatball logo here, so it appears that they'll be leaving their signature around the SpaceX X logo. Alex Gorbanov, mission specialist, the first to leave his signature as one of the first two crew members. A little uncertain about how that looked, but seems to be satisfied with it. Nick Hague now leaving his mark as the first commander to depart from this pad. Given they are running a little ahead of schedule, they've got some time to do some sightseeing here, taking in the view. One of their last bits of unobstructed vantage point here, looking out at the Cape before they get into their SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. The member of the closeout crew with number 11 you see here at the front of your screen. She is the closeout lead for today. See Katie Bishop. Fun fact, this is also the first mission as part of the commercial crew program since the Demo 2 flight that is actually launching in the daytime hours. Nighttime launches are always fun to watch, but it's kind of nice that we'll be able to see this Falcon 9 take flight in the daytime here. Nice panorama of the White Room here before the crew begins to ingress into the Dragon Freedom. Now T-minus 2 hours, 54 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Crew ingress on the timeline was listed as T-minus 2 hours and 35 minutes, so they're running well ahead of schedule here. With a two-man swing, this is moving a little bit faster than with a four-person complement.
This is Core on countdown. T-minus 2 hours 53. Crew have ingressed the capsule.
So before the change in crew happened, Nick Hague was the pilot of this mission, and so he has been doing the majority of his training seated where Alexander Gorbanov currently is in the pilot's seat. However, Alex is still remaining as the mission specialist in this flight. He will be taking on a number of the duties of a pilot, though, since there are only two of them flying on board this mission. Dragon designed to fly and dock autonomously. However, there's a lot of systems to oversee and make sure that they're operating as expected, so it's always good to have humans in the loop, as it were. They still have quite a bit of time before the Dragon hatch is set to close. That's coming up at T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes at about 11:22 a.m. Again, that was according to the original timeline, and clearly they're running ahead of schedule, so don't fall out of your seat with shock if they close the hatch a little bit early. Taking a look at the satellite view from GOES East here. That wave of clouds that's coming in, just listening into the NASA broadcast, that storm system as it pops in, it's set to arrive in about an hour, according to NASA's Daryl Nail, and will generate some stormy weather off and on from that point on. And that's sort of the sticking point with the launch opportunity today. So launch weather officers are keeping a very close eye on things. Now T minus 2 hours, 48 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. We're just getting ready for the first live guest that I teased about 10 or so minutes ago. Had to work out some technical gremlins behind the scenes, but we've got those sorted, and so we are preparing to have him join us. So stand by as we're going to welcome him in just a moment or two. You're watching the live coverage of the Crew 9 mission with Spaceflight Now.
Dragon SpaceX Launch ready for altitude.
I'm with you. Discussion loud and clear.
Have you the same standby for build launch?
Hello there, this is Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Thank you so much for joining us with our continuing coverage of the Crew 9 mission. As you've been seeing over the last several minutes, both Commander Nicholas Hague as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Borbunov are now safely inside the Crew Dragon Freedom, strapped in their vehicle, getting ready to go through some of the final checks before hatch closure comes up in a little less than an hour from now. We're currently T-minus 2 hours, 41 minutes, 16 seconds, and counting. And as we're continuing to track the progress towards the launch of this mission, we've got our first live guest ready to join us. You know, as we've been watching progress on the International Space Station, you may have noticed some particularly crisp views that have been coming down, especially noticeable during the time when the Starliner spacecraft was departing the International Space Station. And that's thanks to a 4K camera payload on the outside of station from the company called SEN. And we are so fortunate this morning to be joined by part of the SEN team. This is Liam Kennedy, who's joining us. Liam is the director for the payload called Space TV1. Liam, how are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me onto this broadcast today. I'm very excited to be here.
We're very happy to have you as part of the broadcast. And so it kind of teed up with a very broad overview of what Space TV1 is. It was launched back during the CRS-30 mission, Dragon flight up to the ISS. But if you could pick up the story from there, you know, maybe wind the clock back before launch came about, how did this mission sort of coalesce together, and what was the goal from SEN with sending these 4K cameras up to the ISS?
Yeah, so SEN is a company that's actually been around for quite some years, and we have our own satellite, a little 20U satellite that was launched in 2022, and that's been capturing 4K views of the Earth daily, and we've done a few live streams from it. So if you go to sen.com, you'll see a history of just hundreds of clips in 4K, and really that's the whole premise of SEN, is to bring 4K views of the Earth to the public for free, and to really bring the public along with us. Now, my connection with SEN really comes back from my work with a little gizmo called the ISS Above, which had me get connected with NASA's live video feeds. And I personally had a passion, an idea that I wanted to see the views from the space station improved. And SEN was obviously the company that was going to be providing that, as far as I could see. So back in 2019, that's when I reached out to Charles Black, who's the founder of the company, and we started discussing opportunities for bringing a payload customized for the space station. And obviously what's beside me right here is really one of the first examples of this. So I happened to be watching this live when we were streaming it privately. We weren't streaming this live, but it was really quite an amazing thing to see this happening. You know, I always wanted to, so we wanted to have a view of the Earth from what I consider one of the best places on the space station, and that puts us right at the front, quite close to where NASA's old HDEV system used to reside. And we have three cameras, three camera views, actually 6 cameras, because you know, you always double up just for failover. This is the one that's pointed directly at the PMA2 forward docking port, and provide us with these just exceptional views. We also have a forward-facing camera for great horizon shots, and then we have a nadir camera. And over the last month, since it's been installed, so it was installed not by a spacewalk, it was installed by a Canada mission, robo-team mission, about a month ago. And yeah, that was after it was launched on SpaceX 30 in March. And we've been pulling our hair out, waiting for the scheduling to happen so that that could be completed. And we're very happy that our first actual live stream we've scheduled is going to be for the docking. And then thereafter, we'll get into really streaming 24/7. And as Space TV director, I'll be one of the folks who's making the choices of camera switching between all of the different views based around what's happening.
And you teed me up to the next question I was going to ask, which was about the live stream of the arrival of the Dragon Freedom, which is, a big reason why we wanted to talk to you today specifically, since it'll be about 28 hours or so from the time of launch to when Dragon is docked at the International Space Station. And so, through the commissioning that you and the Sen team have done since it's been installed, I guess, have there been any hiccups or challenges, or, has it pretty much worked as you imagined it was going to once it was, fully installed on the outside of the ISS?
Yeah, I think, because the payload was up there for a long time, sort of under wraps. So obviously we had to install a few updates, but really it's a remarkable process that we've gone through. We're going through a process of adjusting the color, adjusting the exposures. And we're getting used to being able to operate the payload through the back-end systems that we have access to. But it really is quite extraordinary. We were live streaming privately very soon after we really were switched on. Remarkably, I think it was maybe just a day or so before Starliner undocking. And I was so pleased when we were actually live streaming, and we shared the views with a number of people from Boeing and from NASA, so they could also see it happening live as well. And we've had some really great reviews from those parties too, saying it's obviously so far better than what's currently available from NASA's stream. If you're watching the live stream, I'm sure you were probably broadcasting it when it was undocking, right? There's some pretty grainy examples there. The other key thing, which is unique for us, is that we're recording as well on board. So we're immune to loss of signal events as far as the final clips. And I think the current method of downlinking video from the space station to the EHDC cameras and other cameras up there is generally, if there's an LOS, there's no video of that point, because they're recording on the ground only. So lots of exciting things coming up.
To that point of navigating around LOS or loss of signal, being that this is Space TV 1, is the goal to launch another sort of follow-along mission with this, or do you imagine the evolution of this program, looking like an expansion of connectivity, maybe using a satellite internet provider like OneWeb, like SpaceX's Starlink, or another one, to be able to provide continuous, uninterrupted views? I guess, is that sort of the long-term goal of this?
Yeah, it definitely is. Being a commercial provider, and by the way, yes, it's all free to the public. There will eventually be those pesky ads and sponsorship on there, but there'll be ways that folks can remove that. But yes, the whole way that Sen is set up is to provide this for the long term, and that means we're looking at additional opportunities on the space station, perhaps in other areas, because the location we're in currently, we only have access to forward docking port and the nadir. That the place we're on Bartolomeo doesn't allow a rear view. So we're looking at future options because really, this is going extraordinarily well right now. We also have plans to launch other satellites in LEO. We're not, would anyone be surprised if we might be reaching out to some of the other commercial LEO space station companies who are building, the next round of commercial space stations? I guess the first round of commercial space stations.
Right.
So you can imagine every single one of those, we want to be there because our whole model is to bring all of you who are listening to this broadcast along with us. And we're planning on going to the moon as well. So really bringing everyone out there.
And as SEN is bringing this capability online, it joins a mosaic, if you will, of a number of companies that are designed to bring varying types of Earth observation viewpoints and functionality to the low Earth orbit regime. I guess taking a step back maybe and looking at the bigger picture of observing our Earth and what we want to take away from it, how do you see the future of space TV and that program and SEN overall fitting into the larger picture of how these different companies are gathering Earth observation data and feeding it to different interested parties?
Yeah, so there's ultimately many different ways that our content can be utilized. We are really, I would say, I would position ourselves unlike other traditional Earth observation companies. I'm talking about Planet and others who are doing high-res imagery, of locations around the Earth. We are firmly in the region of providing the stunning visuals and having people view the Earth in as real time as possible. That's really the whole part of that. So I would say that SEN represents an entirely different market segment for traditional Earth observation, but we certainly do fit in the general area of Earth observation. We're just starting out, creating something right now that's inspiring. You'll start to see our video clips in documentaries. Certainly from our first two, we have considerable flight heritage on there of running that platform and creating content that what it's all about is bringing you, the general public, along and being able to feel as if you are really part of moving humans into space.
And lastly, as we return to talking about other parts of this mission, but before we let you go, being that you'll have your eyes on Dragon as it makes its approach to the space station and completes the docking process, give us a picture or an overview of about what time we should expect to start seeing the live feed from SEN and what that will look like for folks that obviously are more used to watching the NASA docking feed. What are they going to be getting from SEN once your broadcast starts with that?
Yeah, so on this first live stream to the public, it will be a very simple view of the live feed. Now the camera itself is, I call it, quite panoramic. So as the Crew 9 Dragon is arriving, you'll see it on the right of the frame pretty early on when it's closer to the space station. So you may look at it and you think the view looks a little bit unusual, but we'll be. I'm not entirely sure right now exactly when in terms of the docking schedule when we'll be there, and that's why if you go to sen.com, there is a countdown for that particular live stream. So we'll adjust it as needed. It's not going to be a hosted live stream like having an on-camera host. We will eventually be doing that. Just so as you know, we have a number of astronauts, retired astronauts and commercial astronauts who are now formally part of SEN's wider, I call it astronaut ambassadors. People who have seen these views with their own eyes. So I don't think I'm stepping out of turn too much if I was to say in the future we'll have some really amazing commentary to the content that we're sharing in real time from people who've actually been up there. And if you go to the website, you'll see that includes Chris Hadfield. Chris has been great in supporting our work and as an advisor, and now also as an ambassador for SEN. So, Chris is great in that respect. Also, Nicole Stott, and then Dr. Cyan Proctor. So, Dr. Cyan Proctor, of course, is inspiration for the astronaut. So, all of those will help have a particular perspective on this from people who've seen the views with their own eyes.
And of course, Nicole Stott, a fellow Floridian and an artist in her own right, in addition to, of course, being a former NASA astronaut. Liam Kennedy, thank you so much for spending so much of your time with us. Really appreciate your insight and look forward to all the views that are coming up on Space TV 1.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And we'll see you all after we've got these wonderful views of the docking in 4K.
We're looking forward to it. And for you that are still watching with us, we're looking forward to you sticking around. We've got lots more live coverage, including some more live guests that are going to be joining us right here live outside of our office, taking a look at the countdown clock. We're at T-minus 2 hours, 25 minutes, 50 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of the Crew 9 mission to the International Space Station. The first time Crew Dragon is lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40. Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now. Don't go anywhere. More live coverage straight ahead.
Dragon, the closeout team is in their final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Please stand by for that and the state machine transition to pad hatch closed and ensure all items are secure from now through launch.
Freedom copies all.
Now T minus 2 hours, 19 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. I want to thank Liam Kennedy again for joining us to talk about Space TV 1, some of the work that they've been doing to commission that 4K camera, or those 4K cameras, I should say, on board the International Space Station. Talk about the upcoming views that we'll be getting of Dragon as it makes its approach to the forward port on the Harmony module when it arrives about 28 hours after liftoff. With Dragon departing today, if it is able to lift off, weather permitting, at 1:17 p.m. Eastern, 17:17 UTC, it will dock with the International Space Station at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC on Sunday, September 29th. What you're seeing right now is the process of closing the side hatch. They're going through very meticulously with that cleaning cloth and a bright light to make sure there's no debris, formerly termed foreign object debris or FOD, so that once the hatch closes, it creates a good tight seal. They're looking for anything even as fine as a piece of hair. So they want a perfectly pristine and clean hatch before it's closed and sealed. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank DS for a 500 yen super chat. Really appreciate that, DS, who says, thanks as always, Will. By the way, do you know who owns those crew transport Teslas? SpaceX or NASA? Those are owned by SpaceX. They're also used during transport of the commercial astronauts when they make their trip out to the pad. So for missions like the just completed Polaris Dawn, as well as the Axiom missions to the International Space Station, those private astronaut missions. T-minus 2 hours, 15 minutes and counting. Still going through some final checks of the hatch before they are ready to give the go-ahead that they're ready to close it. We're right about 20 minutes away from, per the timeline, the point of hatch closure. So this closeout crew has quite a bit of margin left to work any fine details that they want to weave in here. So no rush at this point in time. Again, the closeout crew member with the number 11 is the lead of this group that you're seeing here today.
And Dragon, we're doing final photo verification on the side hatch seal. We'll let you know when we're stepping into side hatch closure.
And so with that call out,
Freedom copies, thanks.
as you've been watching them go through those lights, they're not just illuminating that for their own sake, for the people there in person, but also sending those images back for further verification. So you have a second pair of eyes that can blow it up on a much larger screen and make sure that what the closeout crew believes they are seeing is in fact clear. A question from Snake Bite Spider asking what happens to the stream after the rocket launches. Well, we will continue to stay with the live coverage here on Spaceflight Now until the nose cone opens. So still quite a bit of live coverage left to go. We'll dig a little bit more into the launch timeline after hatch closure here, but just to give you an idea of what we're looking ahead to, I'll just pull that up in my notes. The nose cone open sequence is set to begin about T plus 12 minutes, 50 seconds after liftoff. So we'll stay with our live coverage through and slightly beyond that point. You see they've got approval for hatch closure. and down goes the
The
hatch.
Dragon side hatch is come and closed. Expect a state machine transition to pad hatch close shortly.
Key transition point.
Freedom copies.
Dragon, we are commencing health checks for the launch escape system. Expect a momentary state change followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
Freedom copies. Thanks for the heads up.
Currently T-minus 2 hours, 6 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. As you can see from our live cameras and this pad view right here, the rain is starting to fall out at Space Launch Complex 40. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily switch to another camera view. This is our vantage point of the pad as seen from the Kennedy Space Center press site. Stephen, if we can go to that, I was just about to call for the wide view there. You can see those thunderstorms, rainstorms certainly, that mentioned were going to be rolling in based off those satellite images. Take a look from the pad view here, these NASA SpaceX camera views. Give you an idea of the rainfall. This one really very clearly illustrating the rain starting to come down here now. As the Launch Weather Office was forecasting this mission, they had suggested that this was going to be a possibility, if not a probability, during the countdown. Just listening into NASA's Daryl Nail, there are no lightning strikes that have been detected within the cell that is currently moving over the pad, currently traveling at about 20 knots in a northeasterly direction. Of course, the launch weather team keeping a close eye on this system as it continues to move. Is a live view from the GOES East satellite, an overview of the storm system that is pushing on into the Cape area. According to NASA's Daryl Nail, they are expecting spotty showers throughout the rest of this countdown. So we'll be, of course, keeping a close eye on this, as are the launch weather officers here. You can see the helicopter asset from NASA making another pass over, perhaps returning back to their touchdown site. You can see here, there's a look at landing zone 1, where following liftoff, the first stage booster, tail number 1085, is set to touch down a little more than 8 minutes after liftoff. Or just under 8 minutes with this RTLS, or return to landing site operation. Currently T-minus 2 hours, 2 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. With the hatch closed, we are coming upon the next big milestone, which will be the mission director giving their go, no go for the start of fueling. You can see some of the venting there at the pad as they're starting to condition things ahead of fueling. Falcon 9, powered by a combination of liquid oxygen as well as RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene. When fully fueled, it has 1 million pounds of propellant on board. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank the more than 2,400 of you that are joining with us live this afternoon, or still technically late morning at this point. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into this live coverage. Certainly appreciate that. Also want to welcome in Daniel H. joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level, and then turning right around and gifting 2 Spaceflight Lab memberships. Taking a look at the wide shot here, you can see the storm that is just dumping some rain out near the pads. Looks like a little closer to Launch Complex 39A on the left-hand side of your screen. Pad 40 is out of frame from this camera's vantage point off to the right, but you can see the pad level view in the horizontal box on the right-hand side of your screen. Currently moderate conditions still along the ascent corridor.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a good side hatch leak check.
Freedom copies. Good side hatch leak check.
Good call out from SpaceX on the side hatch leak check. One more box ticked. Of course, the weather is still the question mark, and these intermittent storms that are now passing through to be expected, but still not the most ideal.
Dragon SpaceX for post-ingress briefing.
Freedom's with you.
Dragon, so good news is we've got a healthy pad, Dragon is healthy, and Falcon is looking good. The story remains weather, as previously briefed. We're watching radar data in real time. Currently, we'd be no-go to launch, but we think there's a real shot of getting a clearing in the weather around T-0, and the ascent weather continues to look good, so we've got a chance of going to space today. We'll check in as we have more updates. How copy?
Freedom copies. Good pad, good vehicle. And you're seeing there's a chance with the weather. Outstanding.
With an outlook like that, those are the words you want to hear. You're saying there's a chance. And a chance is better than standing down from a launch opportunity today, so the teams will continue to press forward towards a liftoff. Seeing a couple of lightning warnings for other areas of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, not directly impacting Pad 40 at this time. As we continue on with the countdown here, T-minus 1 hour, 56 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. I want to thank a few more, folks, for your support. Thanks to channel member Leslie Daniel for gifting 5 spaceflight memberships, and moderator and fellow channel member Clistia Lee for gifting 10. So those combined with the 2 from Daniel H. Welcome aboard to our newest 17 channel members. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Daniel, Leslie, and Calistia in the live chat if you haven't already. And we hope you stick around with channel membership, which includes discounts that are on the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments here in 4K. As this mission progresses, SpaceX is running the countdown from its facilities at Hangar X, the site where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as was the case with B-1085 making its second flight to space today, or whenever this mission is able to launch, if weather doesn't prove too insurmountable. Here's a look inside Hangar X, the widest view that we've actually gotten, courtesy of the dry dress rehearsal of this mission. SpaceX operates alongside NASA personnel for crewed launches and other missions to the International Space Station that have NASA in the loop. SpaceX also has support from its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Taking a look at the countdown timeline and some of the milestones that we've already stepped through here. Stepping and just updating this to about where we are right now. The hatch leak check was performed. It was good to go. So the next big milestone here on the countdown will be the go-no-go poll for the start of propellant load. That's coming up at T-minus 45 minutes. Assuming that fueling is cleared, then the crew arm will retract about 3 minutes after that. Following the retraction of the crew access arm, then the Dragon's launch escape system will be armed. In the case of an emergency, the Super Draco thrusters will be used to pull the Dragon spacecraft extremely quickly away from the Falcon 9 rocket and off to safety. Like any other Falcon 9, launch fueling begins with propellant beginning to flow at T-minus 35 minutes. The loading of RP1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 is when cryogenic helium load begins. It's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same happens on the second stage about 4 minutes after that. T-minus 23 minutes, second stage kerosene tank is full. Seeing a little bit of pre-fueling venting there on the rocket. Take a look at the live picture on the right-hand side of your screen. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. It's the event that leads up to second stage LOX load. We see it manifest as the so-called big vent coming up at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Second stage liquid oxygen loading begins at the T-minus 16 minute mark. The final 7 minutes, chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to protect the engines from risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. T-minus 6 minutes, the first stage kerosene tank is full. T-minus 5 minutes, the Dragon will transition to internal power. T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the Dragon spacecraft opening up, and then the transporter erector for the strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. T-minus 2 minutes. Second stage LOX load wraps up, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final minute, we'll hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX Launch Director will give their go for launch 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Coming up at the instantaneous launch opportunity of 1:17 p.m. Eastern, 17:17 UTC for those joining around the world. Weather update for everyone. We are in a phase 2 lightning warning. As mentioned by NASA's Daryl Nail, if they were to try to launch right now, there would be no go for weather. However, as we heard during the communication from the ground to Dragon, there is the hope that and the belief that as they progress towards that T0, that there will be a pocket of good enough weather that they will be able to send Commander Nick Hague and mission specialist Alexander Gorbanov to space today. We will continue to track the progress of these storms and let you know any relevant updates as they come. Now T minus 1 hour, 45 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. In the lead up to this launch opportunity, we had the opportunity to talk with a number of folks about this mission and about the preparation of this pad. One of those conversations was with Amy Misakonis. She is the safety flight lead within NASA's Safety and Mission Assurance Office. We talked about some of the preparations that were made in order to certify this particular pad for crewed flight. So in this section of our conversation, we were talking about the emergency egress system. If you recall,
Dragon SpaceX, the closeout team has departed the crew arm and is on their way back.
Freedom copies, and if they're listening, thank you guys.
We'll relay to them.
some good words to the closeout crew as they are now departing the pad. And so again, this is part of our conversation with Amy, the safety flight lead within NASA Safety and Mission Assurance, as we talk about the emergency egress system, quite a bit different from what we see over at Launch Complex 39A.
NASA provides requirements to the providers, and it's up to the providers to figure out the best solutions to meet those requirements. So they're not locked into a specific design. And so when they were looking at this F-40, they were looking at ways to be new and innovative and safer for the crew. And so they proposed several different options to NASA, and all of those options were assessed for safety and efficiency and all kinds of different factors. And we landed on this chute system, and everything has been tested end to end on this. And while it's very different, it meets all of our requirements, all of our safety requirements for the crew. And so we're really excited to see something new and innovative come out of our relationship with SpaceX on this.
And you mentioned being busy. And again, that was NASA's Amy Misakonis, the safety flight lead within NASA's Safety and Mission Assurance Office. Now T-minus 1 hour, 43 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. We're currently T minus 1 hour, 28 minutes, 40 seconds and counting, as we are continuing to track the progress of the Falcon 9 rocket with the Crew 9 mission up top. We're Dragon Freedom getting ready to lift off in now less than an hour and a half, weather permitting. We're currently in a phase 2 lightning warning for all areas of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station as well as Kennedy Space Center, which is why we are about to bring you our next live guest, but we are indoors for all of our safety. And that's why you're not seeing a lot of folks out here in the wide shot, because it is currently not safe. So basically everyone is somewhere indoors, whether that's in their vehicle or the nearby press buildings. But we continue to press on as the mission continues to move towards a liftoff at 1:17 p.m. And we are fortunate to be joined by a regular here for our live launch coverage, Mr. Pat O'Neill with the ISS National Lab. Pat, good to see you again as always.
It is good to see you as well, and equally happy that we are inside right now so that we don't have to deal with any of those weather issues.
Fortunately not rain, but lightning is nothing to mess with, certainly. And, you know, as we've been watching this mission, obviously they're going up to the International Space Station with a purpose, going to do some robust science and technology demonstrations, and some of the things that are on board this Crew Dragon spacecraft, which you see live here on your screen, are sponsored by the ISS National Lab. I want to dig into a few of those here. You know, one of them in particular that I like to start with is an experiment that has to do with watching the growth of mustard seeds that has some parallels with the Polaris Dawn mission that just recently launched and landed. Talk a little bit more about the ISS National Lab side of that coin and sort of how that ties in with the previous mission.
Yeah, so great question. This is a fun experiment as far as I'm concerned. So to your point, the Polaris Dawn mission, they launched a strain of mustard seeds. They wanted to see how they would react in a higher altitude as far as radiation was concerned. And then they wanted to send the same types of seeds on this mission for a very similar amount of duration. So for the Polaris Dawn mission, those seeds were exposed for 4 to 6 days. It's going to be the same type of scenario on this mission, and then the seeds are going to return back with the Crew 8 astronauts. But it will give us an opportunity to see what the differentiation between radiation spikes and how that impacted the seeds on the Polaris Dawn mission, how radiation impacted the growth of the mustard seeds on this mission, and then that will allow for the United States Air Force Academy and Rodian Scientific to evaluate maybe what next steps might look like, because this is an insight into how we can develop crops in a more stressful or radiation-filled environment, which is obviously instrumental in us being able to live and work off this planet. But there also might be some applications towards us being more effectively growing crops here on this planet in distressed areas.
Yeah, obviously the purpose of the space station is sort of dual to further our ability to go deeper, longer into space, but also to have some on-Earth benefits. Certainly we recognize that the majority of us sadly will not have the opportunity to go to space, so we look to what the space station can provide to us here on Earth. Just sticking with the theme of going into those different radiation environments, we've seen a number of seed experiments over the past decades that the space stations existed. In fact, the X-37B space plane, which launched on a Falcon Heavy rocket, also has a number of seed experiments on board that spacecraft. So as you kind of compile all these data points, I guess, what is this overall puzzle telling us as we're gathering more and more pieces of it?
That's another great question. I mean, obviously, one of the reasons why we have the space station to do this type of research is to learn. And I think that what we've been able to see is there's been instances where NASA's been able to use facilities like Veggie to actually grow crops that could be consumed by crew members. But then there's also a lot of R&D. I'll give an example from back in the day. Budweiser, all companies, they sent a variety of barley crops to the space station. And it was not so much how can we do crops in space, but how can we use this unique stressful environment like we talked about earlier, like whether it's radiation or just the fact that you're in this extreme environment. Are there things that we can learn, that we can extrapolate, bring that back down from space and see if we can build more effective crops for farmers on Earth? Are there ways that they can be more efficient? As our climate continues to change, we're going to need to also adapt to that here on this planet. But also, again, for astronaut long duration missions, it's again, how can we find ways to create crops that will allow for them to remain healthy and vigilant and being able to perform the work that they're doing?
And one of the benefits of the ISS National Lab and the space station as a test bed is not only are governments and research institutions able to send stuff up, but you've got some student experiments that fly pretty regularly, including with this crew rotation mission, right? Can you talk about what's going up with them this time?
So on this mission specifically, there is the annual Genes in Space competition, which is a yearly opportunity for students around the country to propose hardcore genetic experiments on the space station. And this is in partnership with Boeing and with Mini PCR. And this year, the student Isabel Zhang, she is from the Bay Area in California, but she is now a first year at Yale University. So obviously, they do. These students aren't going anywhere of high value. But anyway, so kidding. But she's looking at genetic experiments and radiation in particular because, again, as astronauts go beyond the space station, as they go to places using Polaris Dawn is another example. As we go to Moon, as we go to Mars, we need to find ways to make sure that the astronauts remain safe and healthy. So that's one experiment that's flying on this flight on SpaceX CRS-31, which will be part of the expedition period that the astronauts will be associated with. There's going to be a slew of other investigations, namely from the Student Spaceflight Experiments Program, where there's going to be, I want to say, more than 30 mixed sticks investigations that are going up from students, and they're looking at like a wide variety of investigations. Some of them are more focused on plant biology. There's some just general life sciences, and then there's just physical phenomena too, like how you look at something in this unique environment of space. What happens when you just literally use a mixed stick and you break it, and now these particles are now in this realm. So it's fun for the students to be able to not only send an experiment to station, but also to engineer and to learn the nuances of what it takes to go from concept to actually seeing your investigation fly to the space station, and the excitement that derives from that hopefully is something that can get them further inspired to want to join this growing community here in space.
One of the questions that jumped out at me during yesterday's NASA social event was talking about how the benefits of what happens on orbit can be translated to the general public that maybe is not as thoroughly in the mix of everything. Looking back at maybe some of the recent experiments that have launched, have come back, the learnings have been finalized, can you maybe pluck on an example of something that you sort of made your ears kind of prick up of something that had like a particularly interesting finding that made its way back, and we're looking forward to its application here on Earth?
An example I'll give, and then we'll also segue nicely into some investigations that are flying on SpaceX CRS-31, which are the astronauts on this mission they will help us support in the future. Merck is Merck Research Laboratory. They are one of the preeminent pharmaceutical companies in the world. They've launched a variety of protein crystal investigations to the station over the years, focused on improving the efficacy of Keytruda, which is their FDA-approved cancer therapeutic. So right now, if you were to have that administered to you, you have to do so through an IV, and it's time-consuming, and there's just a lot of variables associated with it. They're trying to make the formulation more efficient, so that instead of you having to have an IV drip at a hospital or at a medical facility all day, you can take a pill, or you can just take a shot, and you're able to just go on with your day. And they feel as though the space environment has the ability to accelerate the efficacy of that drug. So that's an exciting area, but now correlating into what's going to happen for SpaceX CRS-31, in-space production application, that's a big kind of like a buzzword for us right now. There is a company called Sachi Bio. They're going to be flying an investigation where they are going to be actually administering a drug target that they have developed. They're going to be doing it in space to see if it can accelerate some of the findings. And the drug itself is going to be looking at organoids derived that include Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. And so if you're able to not just like looking at from a fundamental perspective, but you're really actively trying to see what the impacts of this therapeutic are, and if they can be accelerated in the space-based environment, then perhaps you are now having a novel place where you can either develop these therapeutics more effectively, or the knowledge and insight that's gained from it can be brought down so that when you're building these out here on the ground, you're going to have a faster drug brought to patients on the ground.
And lastly, we talked about a number of different entities that are working with the ISS National Lab, sending their science either now or in the near future to the space station. If there are those that are interested in getting sponsored by the ISS National Lab or finding some sort of avenue of partnership, what would be, from your perspective, the best way to go about that?
So there's multiple ways where you can become part of the space station research community. The ISS National Lab, we put forth a variety of research announcements over the course of the year. Those span from life sciences to education-related education, advanced materials, technology development. We also have yearly collaborations with the National Science Foundation. One of those is focused on tissue engineering. One of those is focused on transport phenomena. So those are two general pathways that kind of are like the traditional way. There's also a variety of companies that own and operate their own facilities on the space station, and those are called commercial service providers. If you have a cool concept that you think, if you have the means by which to just go and say, hey, I have this idea, I want to do this on the space station, whether it's organoid research or whether it is I would like to try to print this on the space station. You can go directly to some of these companies, and they can work with you to take your concept, and then we can try to put that into our allocation. So I mean, there's ways where you can do it the traditional way, and then there's kind of the new age ways, and that's kind of a way that we certainly encourage a lot of people that already have a flushed out idea on exactly what they want to do, go straight to those companies and see how they can help you.
Of course, we've got commercial space stations coming online, starting in the next decade, if not slightly sooner. So even more potential test beds to go to in the not too distant future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, you've touched on it a couple of times. The space station is a test bed. It's an opportunity for us to validate not just research, but also facilities and also business models. And that's going to be very integral for us as we go beyond the space station to those CLDs. So let's use the space station as best we can so we can formulate those use cases that will allow for these CLDs to be as effective as possible and have those business models in mind when they do go live.
And CLD, commercial low Earth orbit destinations. Pat O'Neill with the ISS National Lab, breaking down the acronyms. Appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate it.
And of course, we are now T-minus 1 hour, 16 minutes, 48 seconds and counting to the liftoff, weather permitting, of the Crew 9 mission. We'll have much more live coverage and commentary, so stick right where you are. We'll be right back with more coverage. You're watching Spaceflight Now.
Freedom's with you.
Dragon, just wanted to check in. Falcon and Dragon are still looking healthy for a launch attempt today. We're still watching the real-time weather for conditions at the T0. Ascent corridor does still remain go based on the latest forecast. At this time, we are trending to continue, and we expect to have the next update around the T-minus 1 hour mark. How copy?
And Freedom copies. The corridor is good, and we're just looking at local weather. We're getting updates at the T-minus 1 hour, and crew's doing good.
Great to hear.
And as you just heard from that communication between mission control and Dragon Freedom. The ascent corridor is still tracking in a positive direction, and they're hopeful that things will be good enough for launch. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. The latest update from SpaceX, as mentioned, they're still keeping an eye on weather, of course, which they say is still 55% favorable for liftoff. So the percentage remains as it was when we entered today. Again, the next big launch weather update expected to come in the next roughly 12 minutes.
Dragon, heads up that we are going to be cycling the orbit tank isolation valve to equalize the low flow pressure system.
Freedom copies. Thanks for the heads up.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for section 5 of 4.100. Please report when you are go for launch.
And Freedom copies. We're go for section 5 and 4.100. SpaceX Freedom, Section 5.4, we're go for launch.
SpaceX copies, crew are ready for launch.
And we are now less than 1 hour away from the planned liftoff. Coming into the final decision about the weather coming up in the next couple of minutes here. T-minus 58 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. We are now, of course, within an hour to the planned liftoff of the Crew 9 mission from Space Launch Complex 40. We are standing by for the next update from the Launch Weather Officer team, according to the Weather Squadron. On T-minus 56 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Coming up about 10 minutes from now is when the SpaceX launch director will need to make the call on the start of prop load. T-minus 45 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes after that is when the crew access arm will swing away from the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon at the top of the vehicle. As we continue to progress into the final hour of the count, less than an hour now, I want to thank the more than 4,000 of you who are joining with us live today. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also want to thank a few folks for your support. A thanks to Super Tech Boy for a couple of $2 super chats. One going to, I appreciate this, my caffeinated beverage fund. Another $2 to the Moderator Appreciation and Retirement Fund. Appreciate the support. Thanks to from Raj MGV, a couple super chat for a super chat there. Brian Morris with a Australian dollar super chat. Space Pony marking 27 months with us as a channel member at the Pad Leader level, saying send it. Grandpa Jim Pondu marking 3 months with us. Thanks to Spaceflight Now for making these amazing videos available to us all. You're very welcome. We're happy to chip in with this live launch coverage, do our small part in helping to tell the story of space exploration. And appreciate Space Pony for 55 Spaceflight Now memberships. Very kind of you. To our newest 5 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Space Pony in the live chat if you haven't already. Currently T-minus 53 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. As weather has played a large role in tracking the progress of this mission, we are going to be joined now by a launch weather officer with the 45th Weather Squadron. So stand by as we prepare our cameras outside for that. We'll be back with you with that live interview momentarily. And welcome back to our live coverage of the Crew 9 mission as we're preparing to see the rocket lift off potentially in the next 50 minutes and just a few seconds. And fortunately, as we've been talking about the weather throughout this broadcast, we're joined by one of the launch weather officers with the 45th Weather Squadron, Arlene Moses. So good to see you again.
Hi, good to see you again as well.
And so, we've been listening to the calls about the weather and the communications between mission control and the crew. We're within an hour. We're about to start propellant load. How are we looking right now?
Things are looking better than they were a few
Dragon
minutes
SpaceX
ago.
for a weather
The
update.
activity that we had that passed overhead about the past 20, 40 minutes here has pushed off to the east. And now we're thankfully looking at a bit of a gap between that activity that's passed us and the next round of activity that's off to the southwest. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed. We can keep any of our local activity down. Otherwise, we look pretty good to go here.
And just told by Steve in my ear that we're getting a weather update actually from your colleagues
around
momentarily.
T-minus 45-minute mark.
Stephen, would you like us?
We'll let you know,
Okay, let's
along
listen in
with
for a moment.
the go for prop load, what that weather looks like. How copy?
Freedom copies. Outstanding news. Thank you.
Okay, by the sounds of it, it sounds like they're proceeding into propellant load, as you were just alluding to. So, within the next, 48 minutes, 48 seconds, what are some of the things that could potentially scuttle this? What are you and your team watching out for at this point?
The main thing we're going to be watching, we still have some of those remnant effects from Helene. I know Helene's moved far inland across the kind of Tennessee Valley right now, but we have a bit of a trailing boundary that's wrapped back around across us here in Central Florida this afternoon. And that's giving us that still bit of a tropical atmosphere with top of some of the bit of sunshine we're getting right now can make things start to pop up, like we normally see in the summer. And so those are going to be what we're keeping an eye on here in the next kind of 40 to 50 minutes until I can see this afternoon.
During the pre-launch briefing, our colleague Brian Sizik was mentioning that Helene acting a little bit different than some of the other hurricanes that have moved through the state of Florida and on up into the Georgia, Carolinas area, that it's creating a little more of a curve and, like you said, a wraparound effect, right?
Correct. It became post-tropical. In other words, it kind of transitioned from being a tropical system to more like a nor'easter, if anybody's familiar with those type of systems, a cold core system, we'd call it. And because of that, it got a front attached with it, just the same type of fronts we'd see in the wintertime that come through. This one doesn't bring any cooler weather, unfortunately, but it does give us a little better chances for these thunderstorms that we've been seeing.
And the launch weather forecast that was out yesterday was tracking the ascent corridor weather as moderate levels, but it sounds like it's been trending better today. Can you talk about sort of what's being watched and what potentially could still be in the area?
Yeah, the main thing too, but that was Helene as well. As we probably heard, if you were listening, Helene was a very, very large system, near the top of the size we've seen for this kind of area. And because of that, it still was some effects that was even off the coast into our ascent corridor. But as Helene has started to shift a little bit more to the inland and a little bit west of where it was, that's allowed conditions to clear up a little bit better over the ascent corridor.
Gotcha. And of course, it's not just the atmospheric conditions for the crew as it flies uphill, it's also for the potential recovery zone weather and the waves out there. But that's, I guess, not an impediment, it sounds like this.
No, not right now. We're not tracking any significant concerns with the ascent corridor.
Gotcha. Anything else that folks should know or understand as we're continuing these next 46 minutes?
Just to keep an eye to the sky. We're watching the same thing. We're watching how things kind of evolve over the next kind of 40-45 minutes, and we can collectively keep our fingers crossed. We can keep those thunderstorms at bay here until we can get our crew safely off of the space this afternoon.
And of course, if it's not today, they have opportunities tomorrow and Monday if need be.
Yes, we do. Fairly similar weather, though a little bit drier, so things won't be quite as spicy as we saw today.
Like spice on food, not in the weather. Arlene
Exactly.
Moses, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
And of course, we are now within less than a minute away from the call and the start of prop load. So we're going to go ahead and step back inside. We have much more live coverage for you coming up here. You're watching Spaceflight Now, live coverage of the Crew 9 mission.
And launch control at this time. You may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement. Launch control copies, arming now.
And a good update there is we're now T-minus 44 minutes, 38
Crew arm
seconds.
is armed for motion.
We're getting ready to see the crew arm swing away from the Dragon spacecraft, and there it goes.
Crew access arm retraction has started.
Crew access arm now having swung away. The next
Crew access arm retraction complete.
event that we're looking for is for the launch escape system of the Dragon spacecraft to be armed. The crew of getting into the Dragon spacecraft.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for section 6. Close visors and arm the launch escape system.
Through a dry dress rehearsal.
And Freedom copies, we're go, section 6.
That came up on Tuesday before Hurricane Helene passed through. And so they've gone through this mission profile up to, of course, the point of launch.
SpaceX Freedom, visors are closed, and we are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies.
Visors are down. The launch escape system has been armed. Again, this is an emergency precaution. So if there were an emergency prior to launch with the Falcon 9 rocket, the Dragon spacecraft would be able to make a quick escape away using the Super Draco thrusters. Now less than 42 minutes to plan liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket.
Launch escape system is verified armed.
Good call. The launch escape system armed. Again, this is an emergency contingency in the case that it were needed. Nice dual view of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon spacecraft on top. It's been fairly gloomy. You're taking a look at the satellite view here. To add to our conversation with Arlene Moses, just an update from NASA commentator Daryl Nail. That track they were just seeing of those clouds is pushing its way out toward here. However, it will not arrive until after T0. Now less than 5 minutes away, or just about 5 minutes away from the start of fueling the Falcon 9 rocket. That will start with RP-1 being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen being loaded on board Falcon 9's first stage.
Tanks are venting for the start of propellant load.
Good call. That propellant load about to start. Now less than 2 minutes away. Hearing a little bit of pad noise. We're now T minus 36 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Just about a minute away from start of fueling. Now less than 30 seconds from the start of prop load. Should be hearing a call out for that momentarily.
Propellant load has started.
And a good call from SpaceX Mission Control. Propellant load now starting as RP1, or rocket grade kerosene, is now beginning to flow on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. Liquid oxygen will be loaded on the Falcon 9's first stage. As we see the LOX begin to fill the stage 1 tanks, you'll see the frost level on the outside of the Falcon 9 first stage start to climb as the super cold densified liquid oxygen flows. Now T minus 34 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. As astronaut Nick Hague, who is the commander of this mission, formerly the pilot before the crew assignments switch, preparing to make his second trip to the International Space Station. However, this will be his third time launching. His first go around on the MS-10 mission went far from planned, as there was a catastrophic failure with the Soyuz rocket, which called for abort as the rocket was beginning to climb. We had the opportunity to speak with Nick Hague out of the Johnson Space Center before he made his way to Florida in preparation for this launch. This was back when he was serving as the pilot for the mission, but still obviously a key part of Crew 9. We asked him about that experience with the in-flight abort and how it helps his thinking regarding human spaceflight. So this is NASA astronaut and commander of the Crew 9 mission, Nick Hague.
Even going into that, I think everybody that gets ready to strap themselves onto a rocket understands that this is a complex, really challenging problem, and that there is inherent risk. What we do is dangerous, and we do lots of things to manage and control that, but stuff happens. And so that's why we've got the layers of redundancy and systems that are going to keep us safe in those moments where something goes wrong. And that's a great example of the human ingenuity to put the things in place, recognizing we need those when the human system fails in another aspect. And so what happened, right? We're pointed straight up, going 4,000 miles an hour, and when one part of a rocket decides to slam into the other part of the rocket, you get one of those rapid, unexplained disassemblies that happens. It's like a roller coaster. You shake to the side, the rockets had pulled us away, and in that moment, all that training that we had done leading up to that launch kicks in, and you're focused on your procedures and running those procedures as perfect as you possibly can, because you know that that's how you're going to get down on the ground safely. It's an easier thing for the operator in the moment to endure and to go through than it is for everyone else that has to be on the ground and watch it happen. And so I think for me, it didn't change the reality of what spaceflight means, but for so many of my friends and family, they understand now in a very tangible way just how difficult it is, what we do. But they also at the same time appreciate just how important what we do is, and that's why we keep doing it.
And Commander Nick Hague preparing to make that voyage once more in just a little more than 31 minutes. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. Coming up, the next milestone will be the loading of cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels, Falcon 9's first stage. They'll use this to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight.
Start at stage 1 cryo helium loading.
And there you hear that call on this stage 1 cryo load. Again, that helium used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same process will happen in another few minutes on the Falcon 9's second stage. When the crew arrived, they touched down at Space Florida's launch and landing facility, formerly the Space Shuttle landing facility. We had the opportunity to ask some questions of the commander and mission specialist. One of the notable things that folks may notice about this mission is that the NASA patch, which formerly bore the names of the original 4 crew members, now is starkly nameless. So when we had the opportunity to talk to Commander Nick Hague here, we asked him about that and the decision and its symbolism, if you will, with this mission and how it's changed. So here once again is NASA astronaut, Space Force Guardian, and commander of the Crew 9 mission, Nick Hague.
Yeah, the lack of names on the patch, I think, is emblematic of, like I said before, this mission is bigger than any one crew. It's bigger than any one person. And so we've got a dynamic challenge ahead of us. And it, in the response to how do we adjust and how do we adapt to do the mission that we've got to do, I've never felt closer to my crewmates. I've, that bond that you've built, that we built for the better part of a year and a half with Zena and Stephanie was as strong as ever, as they're working side by side with us, helping getting us ready. And then, we don't just train together when we're assigned, we train together before that. And so I've had opportunities to work with Butch and Sonny. I've had opportunities to train as part of Knowles and share a tent with Sonny for 10 days in the wilderness. And so we know each other, and we're professionals, and we step up and do what's asked of us. So I'm looking forward to working with them, and I think we're going to pull together without a problem.
And again, that was Crew 9 Commander Nick Hague. Now, teeing up this clip, I mentioned that Hague is a Space Force Guardian. He's got the rank of Colonel. He'll be making history as the first Space Force Guardian to launch to space. However, he will not be the first Guardian who has been in space, since Mike Hopkins, during the Crew 1 mission, transferred from the Air Force to the Space Force in the midst of the Crew 1 mission. So he's got the distinction of being the first Guardian on orbit. But Nick Hague will have, of course, the notable place in history of being the first Guardian to launch to space as a Guardian, lifting off from Earth. Now T-minus 26 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. We are coming up on the point of